Arancha, what a pleasure to see you here.
Thank you very much for the hospitality.
Thank you. Haven't seen you for a long time, but now a lot of people are talking about climate change, and not just talking about, but try to integrate that element into the global governance system, including trade and economics governing system. But how is that likely to be studied? Tell me more about how the EU, from your perspective, has been doing it. Now we see some controversies in terms of taxes. For example, we're considering imports based on what they call as the carbon factor. Yeah. Meanwhile, we also see the EU, for example, doing investigations against the so-called subsidies that China put into develop new energy, electric cars, for example, and the batteries. So how do you see these practices, the nature of these?
For sure, we need to do more to reduce emissions. We're not doing enough, and we are not doing it fast enough. As a result of that, the temperature continues in our world continues to increase. We cannot afford this. We already see the impact that it's having on our countries. Sometimes it's too much rain, sometimes it's not enough water, sometimes it's too dry, sometimes these extreme weather events are also the result of the fact that the Earth is suffering. So we need to decarbonize faster. But we need to do this in a manner that doesn't only help one country or two countries with huge impact on others. We have to build the spaces where we will discuss the measures that countries take to reduce emissions, preventing that these measures have incredible negative impacts on others. This is where I think the places like the World Trade Organization have a role to play. Then this is different from the fairness of international trade. I think both the EU and China are committed to keeping their markets open. And this is because a big part of growth in Europe and in China comes from open markets. But when one looks at the trade figures between China and the EU, I think it's fair to say that Chinese exports to Europe are growing in a big way. European exports to China are diminishing in a big way. So I think rather than, we have two choices. We hit each other on the head, or we sit down and we look at what kind of barriers we have that are preventing trade from showing its fullest potential. My preferred avenue would be the second one. But, I also understand that people get nervous if they see a deterioration of their economic prospects. And they think, I'm not judging, they think that there is unfairness.
So what about, once again, that climate issue in terms of cross-border taxation? That many say whether EU is going to set an example for others and whether there's going to be a downward spiral, things getting worse before any signs of getting better, more unilateralism as a result. What about your thoughts?
So I think, what the EU has done basically is massively reduce emissions of CO2 in Europe. But now there is a concern that this reduction could be in a way impaired by imports of CO2 when trading with other nations, right? The best thing would be that we all adopt a carbon price, but we are not there.
Or any other plan that we can all share together.
That's right. But because we are not there, we have to, so what's the second best? And so the EU has taken a measure to basically prevent imports of CO2 with trade. And I understand that other countries are also thinking of doing the same. Now, if every country does it its own way, in my view, it's less efficient than if we were to bring this conversation to the World Trade Organization and maybe look at how to compare the efforts that every country is doing to reduce emissions and how to, reduce those emissions in a manner that is more cooperative rather than conflictual. But for sure we need to do more because we are not reducing emissions as fast as we need to protect next generations. This is a big issue for the young people. I know this because in our university in Sciences Po in Paris, this is a huge issue for our students. They think it's unfair to future generations that we are polluting too much today, that we are not doing enough today, because the earth they will inherit, it's an earth that would be too polluted.
And how to avoid the scenario that people are, or policymakers are doing it with their unilateral approach and also protectionism approach rather than collective approach. That's really another concern related to this.
Correct. And then therefore, let's sit down around the table, let's move from words to action, and let's be serious about working together to reduce CO2 emissions faster, because we are not moving fast enough.
The other thing is related to policies, for example, regarding batteries or electricity cars. We have seen the recent investigation against the so-called subsidies that China has put into this regard by the EU. How do you see this will shape the discussions for the future, especially about the link between environment and trade?
So I think we need to decarbonize also our vehicles. We also need to move to vehicles that reduce CO2 emissions, and electric vehicles are a big part of the answer. And for sure, China has been investing a lot in this electric vehicle in the past and has been putting a lot of research and innovation in this space, and this is good. But what I know is that when I look at the trade figures, there is a big imbalance between China and the EU, and it didn't used to be the case before. And the imbalance is essentially not on the Chinese side, in the sense that Chinese exports continue to grow. Where there is a difficulty is on European access to the Chinese market. This is where I think it would be very important for Europe and China to sit down and take this seriously, because the two need markets to remain open. But the two will confront a situation where the politics of trade will oblige them to take more drastic measures to close their markets, and this would not be good. So more dialogue and more action is, in my view, the way to do it, and preserve, in the meantime, markets open, because this will be a guarantee also that we let our economies also show their full potential.
We have heard a lot of terminologies like decoupling. Now we also see new terminologies replacing decoupling, so-called de-risking. There are different arguments as to whether this is just makeup of the same concept. What is your take? And what do you think is the real essence, no matter what we call them, that needs to be worked on right now, given the realities?
So let's be honest. Everyone is taking measures to, so to speak, de-risk. Europe is, the US is. What is de-risking? Is being more attentive to the security part of the relationship, including on the economic and trade space. Caring more about ensuring the security of the exchanges. So it's important. It's a representative of the turbulent, more competitive world we are living in, but we have to be careful that the pendulum doesn't move completely to the security space. We have to find a new balance between the economy and security. And we have to be careful in finding this balance, that we don't go too much on the security, which is, pretty much a zero-sum game, but we also are not naive to think that it can only be about efficiency and openness. So let's find this new balance. Let's do this with guardrails. Let's do this together, as opposed to just simply hitting each other on the head with a hammer, because that inevitably will lead to suboptimal solutions, will lead to more pain, will lead to more inflation at a time when we are all trying to do exactly the opposite, which is trying to bring confidence into our economies, so that in this period of turbulence, the economy can continue to generate the jobs and the innovation and the competitiveness that our citizens, our workers require.
Right. Your transition from the political career to the academic career has been applauded by many of your friends. Now, I want to know, when you were approaching your students, who are the leaders of the next generation, what would you advise them in terms of how the governance system can be built? With what kind of skills can they be built? And what they need to learn in order to be the builder of that?
Yeah, so I'm very humbled now to be the Dean of the Paris School of International Affairs in Sciences Po, working with 1,500 young students from all across the world, more than 130 nationalities represented. So it's like a mini representation of the world. It's very humbling because I see a young generation that is concerned. It's concerned about the direction in which the world is moving, because this is the world they will inherit. But at the same time, they want to be architects of this world. They want to have a say. They just don't want to see what happens. They want to have an influence in shaping. So I think our responsibility as a university is give them the knowledge, give them the skills, and give them the experience to be the architects of an international order that faces enormous challenges, but that they will not shy away from the challenges. They will understand that by keeping spaces for dialogue and cooperation, they can get better results than if they just simply resort to to isolating response, isolation, or to national responses. That's, in essence, I think this is what we're trying to work with them, so that they can be these architects for bringing more security, more stability, sustainability, prosperity to this turbulent world.
Thank you so much, Arancha. As always, thank you.
Thank you.